So I get that, but it's not happened yet, even though apparently it's imminently going to happen. Okay, that's one thing I want to talk about. And that relates to the 2011, I haven't looked at the warrant, the warrant I ultimately signed. Right. About the other ones. Yeah. For 2013, right. So that you could try to cure the mistake in the warrant. Charges, but I think that you may have a problem if there's reason, things beyond reasonable doubt and stuff. So I don't know. Yeah, you're gonna have an uphill battle on that unless you get some more. But I think you've made your threshold on everything. You can tell your clients first how you do the better or the bad news. Huh? As it respects cases before the court and defendant Durk Banks, 19 CP 183973, this court finds probable cause for criminal attempt to commit murder, aggravated assault, participation in criminal street gang activity, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. As it relates to 19 CP 183693 involving defendant Davon Bennett, the court finds probable cause for possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, participation in a criminal street gang activity, aggravated assault, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, and criminal attempt to commit murder. Court notes that, and as everyone is aware here, the standard here is a probable cause standard, which is a far lower standard than the standard beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the jury trial standard. And as it relates to...
Do you see, and we've been talking about Black disciples in the Chicago area, is it possible to continue your affiliation and even commit crimes when you move out of Chicago if you're in a different city or if a different area?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you see crimes occurring as part of your investigations that are not in Chicago by Black disciples?
Yes. All street gangs from Chicago.
And were you and other members of the Chicago Police Department aware of some of the movement of this particular group we've been talking about here down to the Atlanta area?
Yes, ma'am.
Is armed robbery or the commission of a robbery and shooting, potentially and related to that armed robbery, something that is closely linked to criminal street gang activity, specifically with the Black disciples?
Yes, ma'am.
And why do you say that?
They do it out of beefs on social media. I mean, the robbery is to gain some monetary gain, some sort of carjacking gang, and then the aggravated battery, that's what we call with the firearm in Chicago. That is just part of the war. They shoot back and forth at each other constantly.
And when I talked to you about the concept of loyalty, one of the things you said is that's one of the 3 L's we talked about. one member of the gang or one person that you're riding with or associated with through the criminal street gang context is shot at or shooting, is it uncommon or is it something you see in your investigations for other members
sounding
to take
goofy
up
as
that
hell.
cause?
Yes.
And why is that?
You're being loyal to him. You're there to protect each other during your whatever criminal act you're committing.
Just one moment, Ryder. Those are all my questions. Any reader.
All right, thank you.
Welcome to the South, Detective Kilroy.
How are you, sir?
Manny Aurora. Do you know anything about this shooting from February of 2019?
Just what they filled me in on.
Okay. Did you provide any type of information about this crime? The only thing you know is what they told you, correct?
Correct.
So you don't know if this is in furtherance of gang activity, gang-related, or some guy just robbing somebody and shooting up the place, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Weatherspoon, he's a Chicago person. I'm sure you're familiar with him in custody. Is he a gang member?
I can't find any documentation. I never met him, so I wouldn't be able to tell you yes or no.
Okay.
He's not documented in the Chicago Police Department's database.
With regards to the database, you said Mr. Banks is documented. When was he documented in that database?
I'd have to go back and look at the pictures. No, I know one was back in November of 2014.
And you said, did he self-identify or did somebody else tell you he was a gang member?
Someone else told me, but through social media and all that, that's how we kind of...
Okay. So when he's in the database, it's not that he self-identified or did any other crimes like we've talked about. It's because somebody anonymously or whatever told you all through social media that he could be a gang member. Is that correct?
No, you put together all the circumstances and you kind of figure it out. I mean, it's not just you're hanging out with Jonny, so you're something. You got it's the conglomeration of the whole. It's more than just that's it. You understand?
So I'm sure here, what all is it that put him in the database besides the social media?
He probably admitted to someone back in the day. I'm not aware that he was self-admitted to being a black disciple from that faction.
Okay. So when you say self-admitted, he would have admitted to a law enforcement officer or somebody that he's...
Yes, sir.
Okay. So while we're presuming that he may have self-admitted, the one tangible piece of evidence that we know is through
What's wrong, Cuddy?
He's been... Whoever provided you that social media link or whatever, that's the most...
Man, y'all need to goddamn it listen to this man. This man, goddamn it.
And who he associates with.
This man, goddamn it, got DJ Academic info.
His friend.
And you know he's from Inglewood, correct?
Yes.
And pardon the French, but it's like one of the shittiest parts of Chicago, right?
Probably the worst.
Yeah, and it's the most dangerous.
It's right up there, yes, sir.
Okay. With regards to the database, did you guys have to clean it up when Joe Ferguson, the Chicago IG, found so many errors in the Chicago database that evidence wasn't being admitted anymore at trials?
That's out of my realm. That's like in a higher up. It's out of my pay grade, sir. I don't know. They haven't done anything that I know of.
Okay.
I know they took a little thing out of like association. That's about it. That's all they've taken out.
So they've taken out association.
Yes.
So now we're left with...
Man, they goddamn it Lav and Georgia trying to...
And then...
Man.
Correct.
Social media, watching with my own eyes, yeah.
This motherfucking nigga right here, he got all his motherfucking facts from goddamn it DJ Academic page and trying to take it in the courtroom like he knows the fuck he talking about.
You know, people will tell you who other gang members are. Are these gang people that are trying to get out of life so they're ratting on all their friends, or what are we talking?
Different things. Proffers. Just casual conversation with people.
Okay.
He red as fuck telling all this fuck said shit.
Life and all that stuff that you mentioned.
Well, yeah, you see that. Even when my example was that is you see the older men in their 50s and 60s, and they, were in the Woodlawn neighborhood, they still claim Black Peace Zone, but they quit being it because it was turned to El Rukin, but they want to be Black Peace Zone. I see that myself firsthand, so it goes up until not.
Hey, Lil Vulture, go on hit on with all that bad energy, bro.
And you know Mr. Banks Atlanta, correct?
I haven't seen him since, 2015 or so, yes, sir.
Okay. You're aware of his successful music career, signed with Interscope Records, and all that kind of stuff?
I know he's got a lot of rap videos. I didn't know he was signed with Interscope.
Okay. You mentioned that Mr. Collier, is he or is he not associated with the BDs?
Yes, some of he's part of THF. They're a mixture, a conglomeration of BDs and Mickey Cobras, and they fully are associated with the BDs through the GDK movement.
Okay.
It's a long, it'd take hours and hours to explain.
Right. The incident that took place here, I know you don't know anything about it except what the government's told you, so you haven't researched anything with regards to that incident, right?
No, they showed me a video, and that's about it. That's all I saw.
And so on February 5th, you knew it was Super Bowl weekend here in Atlanta, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you would imagine a lot of people come down for that. Gangsters, regular people, musicians, you name it.
That's why I stayed away.
All right, fair enough. Now, one of the things that you said is the crimes that the prosecutor asked you about. You said sometimes they do it for the nation or the furtherance of their reputation with the gang, right?
Yes, sir.
And then sometimes they just do it for their own individual purposes to make a couple bucks.
Correct.
All right. So the individual purposes got nothing to do with the gang. I just need to go make some.
Image photograph.
First detective took it. He was on his desk.
You know, states one, doctors.
He's on the hall. Okay. Well, let me ask you about my client is Mr. Bennett.
Okay.
Mr. Bennett, you believe, is a board member of ED.
Yes, he is.
And ED's colors are red and black.
They were. There's really no color faction anymore. All you see is white T-shirts and blue jeans in the city anymore.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
People stop wearing
The colors are kind of, they're out of the game. You see some Black Peace Stones and the Hispanic gangs, they're still in the colors, but other factions of gangs.
Was BD's colors ever identified as light blue?
No. Baby blue, no, sir.
And then teach me, if you would, in watching the video,
Right?
I couldn't tell you if it was or wasn't. It happened here. It's out of my jurisdiction, so I don't know what's going. I don't have the beat of the pulse here. So
So if the Atlanta detective says talk to the Chicago detective about the gang links, you don't know anything about the gang links with regards to specifically February 5th of this year, right?
well, I know the people involved they have an association together. Yes, sir.
Okay, so because people know each other, that's all we have, right? And he has a song where he talks about, you said not directly or not outright, but tangentially, some of the lyrics in his song.
It was Bennett's song. It was,
Bennett's song.
yes.
All right. So this is what we've come to here. We're talking about a gang case where nobody has any information of what's furthering the gang, but there's a song.
Question?
I think, was Mr. Witherspoon, you talked about enemies. Is Mr. You said he's not a gang member, right?
Not that I have knowledge of, sir. No.
Do you have any evidence that Witherspoon is an enemy of Mr. Banks or anybody else?
He's in what?
An enemy of Mr. Banks or anybody else?
No idea. Never met him. He didn't pop on my radar until Atlanta reached out.
Right. And so it's just as likely it's a one-off that somebody decided to rob him because he was carrying $30,000 supposedly in cash and flashing it. That would happen.
That could happen, yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Smith? All right. All right, you are excused. Thank you for coming. Have a safe trip back to Chicago.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, does the state have any other witnesses to call?
No, Your Honor.
Is the state rights?
Yes, Your Honor. State rights.
Will your defendant, will you on behalf of your defendant, Mr. Banks, have any witnesses to call?
Not for probable cause.
All right, what about you, Mr. Smith, on behalf of your client?
No, Judge.
All right, is both of the defendants rest, or is rest, is there any argument that you want to put up?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Well, I think we talked about this last time. primary issue that's a sticking point here is this gang activity warrant. It says, Mr. Dirk Banks, the said accused, unlawfully was employed or associated with a criminal street gang, Black Disciples, to conduct or participate in criminal gang activity by shooting at the victim, Alexander Weatherspoon, as his co-defendant shot and robbed the victim. There is no link that's been given except pure speculation that he's a gang member or he self-identified years ago. If this is going to be enough, even for probable cause, to say this is furtherance from gang activity, because the Atlanta officer couldn't tell you. They said, talk to the Chicago guy. The Chicago person says, I have no idea. That count cannot survive. I can't argue about the possession of a gun based on the blue arm that was sticking out or what this lady may have seen or may not have seen. So we're not arguing about the possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, because that's certainly a jury issue. But criminal attempt to commit murder, I can't argue with that, because he said the blue arm may belong to Mr. Banks. I understand that. Then the lesser included, of course, ag assault. I believe there'd be enough evidence on probable cause standard to go forward on that. But I will point out that the possession of a firearm by convicted felon doesn't stand here. If I could submit exhibits 2 and 3. What had happened is when he was convicted of a gun count, the Federal Circuit, the 7th Circuit up there, found that statute unconstitutional some years back. And he just never went around and got that taken care of. So what I've done is we've filed to have that prior conviction taken off. I'll mark this as 2 and 3, signed by local counsel. Out there, it's got his entire criminal record attached to it. It explains why he's not a felon, because that was an error. He just never got around to getting it taken care of, because unfortunately my client doesn't understand the law and what happens in the Daily Report type magazines about constitutional interpretation of things, and that isn't going to stand. So based on what we've provided the court, I think we should find no probable cause on the possession by convicted felon and the gang charge. The other 3, I think there's enough to get forward, and we'll have to deal with it at trial. And I'd like my 1, 2, and 3 admitted, Your Honor, if that's okay.
Yes, 1, 2, and 3. I'd like to see 2 and 3. They pass them up here.
I can give you an extra copy if you want to keep it.
Okay.
Or either. Yeah, that way you can write on it or whatever you need. Can I go?
Yes, please. All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Judge. Judge, my ultimate goal is to get my client a bond. I think that if you were to find the probable cause exists only to bind this case over on aggravated assault, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, then I can have a bond hearing. I think any day of the week in any other case, were it not for the celebrity status of these 2 individuals, then this would be an aggravated assault. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the facts and evidence show that everybody's together. They're a group traveling in a caravan. They pull up into the varsity parking lot, park, and then the driver begins to struggle or fight over something that he either wants or wants to take or doesn't want taken from him. And then I think that the evidence supports what I'm about to tell you, and that is that my client's not even on the side of the vehicle when a gunshot rings out. And we know that the victim himself, Mr. Weatherspoon, has a semi-automatic weapon that we can presume is out and about. When he's running across the street, he drops it. There's 2 issues I'm going to take up with the court, if I can. On probable cause for gang activity, you do need to show a nexus. The case is Rodriguez versus the state, decided by the Supreme Court in 2009. You have to not only show gang activity, but you have to show that the illegal conduct was in furtherance of a gang purpose. A nexus is what the court described as Justice Carley that wrote the opinion. So submit to the court, we asked on direct and on cross for the first detective from Atlanta to teach us why this activity was in furtherance of the gang conduct. And my client's not a party to the whole struggle over the back. There's no indication he aided, abetted, or assisted. I think it's the state, and I know the court knows its duty to find that the state has the burden to show that there was some coordinated effort before there became a struggle to steal, and there was not. So I don't know why the money is a component of gang activity, but there's certainly no furtherance. All it is a shooting. And I'm going to submit to the court, I think I know what happened. I figured it out in the last few hours. That there's a struggle at the side of the vehicle for a bag. Shots ring out when Mr. Weatherspoon pulls out his gun. And then my client runs around the corner and tries to protect third parties. And so we turn now to the attempted murder charge. The state has to prove that the intent was to kill. There was no intent to kill. I don't think even pulling from every different angle there was an intent to kill. There was an intent to stop a killing himself. I think that's what the facts and evidence support. So any other case would be an aggravated assault. I ask that you bind the case over on aggravated assault, possession of firearm by convicted felon.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
I first want to start by addressing the court on something Mr. Smith just said about the status or celebrity of this case. We are before this court on the charges that I'm asking the court to find probable cause on because of the facts and circumstances of what happened on February 5th, 2019 and nothing else. The charges are appropriately before this court based on the totality of what occurred out there, and I'm asking that this court find probable cause on all of the charges that are on the calendar. So one count for each defendant in possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, to include Mr. Banks, which I'll address in just a moment. One count of criminal street gang activity predicated on the shooting that the court heard testimony about. One count of aggravated assault as a result of, again, the shooting that the court has been hearing about this morning and afternoon. And one count of possession of firearm during the commission of a felony. I'm also asking the court find probable cause on one count for both defendants of criminal attempt to commit murder. Again, Mr. Smith just told the court that his client is not a party to this struggle based on the testimony and the evidence that we've heard. Instead, I think this court has evidence directly to the contrary. Detective Churchill testified that based on his review of the video surveillance and his conversation with both the victim and the eyewitnesses out there, that the circumstances really unfold in kind of a close environment. There is a physical struggle that begins inside the passenger compartment of that car. The victim is trying to get away and being pulled back. There is no evidence before this court of any bag or any mystery item that's being pulled or brought over by the victim. Instead, this court has evidence that the victim was they were attempting to rob the victim inside the vehicle. There was enough for the victim to get away, and instead, all three of the defendants that we've been discussing are a critical part of what happens afterwards, which is that they attempt to gun this man down. He's shot on the side of the vehicle, sustains a very serious wound, loses a significant amount of blood. Court heard testimony that he was struck in the femoral artery, and then as a result of that, he kind of collapses there at the club entrance outside of One Cigar Lounge. This court heard testimony that Mr. Banks and Mr. Bennett are active shooters on that scene. They are not just in a vehicle. They are not unaware of what's going on, but instead they're both outside that car, at the rear of the car as the fight's going on. Mr. Banks there with the gun, Mr. Bennett there with the gun, and then instead of pulling off, Mr. Banks pulls forward, extends his arm out the driver's side window of that car and fires multiple rounds in the direction of the victim. Mr. Bennett is on foot firing rounds again in the direction of the victim, which is, of course, more than enough evidence of the intent to murder, the intent to take a life. I'm asking that this court find probable cause on all of these counts. For the commission of criminal street gang activity, this court heard from a detective from the Chicago Police Department, and I wanted the court to hear from this detective because it's the Chicago Police Department that originally documented these individuals, has knowledge about the way this organization works and the types of crimes associated with Black disciples. Because of that, this is absolutely criminal street gang activity, and it has appropriate nexus. I talked to Detective Kilroy specifically about armed robberies and why that's an important part of the types of crimes this gang does, because I submit to the court that What the court needs to determine is the predicate offense of the shooting, the membership in this crime, and is the crime itself the type of crime that this gang does. We're here at the probable cause standard. All three of these members are documented, and most importantly, they're all three there together with a critical role in this crime. As to Mr. Banks' felony conviction, I think Mr. Aurora provided the court documentation on a 2011 conviction, 2011 CR, I think the number is 174720. The issue that he's talking about is an issue that was litigated in Illinois and decided on, but Mr. Banks has a 2013 conviction. It's 2013 CR 125990. That is the conviction that I asked Detective Churchill about. That is a good felony conviction. He entered the plea in August of 2014, and that's the evidence that's before the court. I'm asking that you find probable cause on all counts that are before you now. Thank you.